That day, with the first light of dawn, the heavy doors of the grand hall slowly creaked open. The air inside, along with the light flickering from the crystal chandeliers, was filled with a suppressed sense of superiority. Everyone wore perfectly tailored suits, and their name tags glittered with doctoral titles like they belonged to another world. In this atmosphere, the woman who quietly entered the hall was completely out of place. She wasn't carrying a fancy handbag, nor did she have high heels. She chose invisibility with her faded linen pants and the old cardigan peeking out from under her wrinkled t-shirt. But her invisibility was only on the outside. The eyes that saw her soon activated a different feeling: contempt. "You're at the wrong place, ma'am. The parent-teacher meeting is downstairs," a laugh whispered through the room. A group of young academics chuckled, eyeing each other. Lena didn't lower her head. She pressed the thick notebook to her chest and walked toward the back rows of the hall. As she sat down, she felt the silent stares of those around her. But she was used to it. This wasn't the first time Lena had made people think she was in the wrong place. Beneath her ordinary appearance were complex theories she had learned alone, late at night, under a desk lamp. She had dropped out of college to care for her mother, which was why she had even turned down offers from Harvard. For her, academic titles didn't matter, understanding did. And she understood something many of them didn't. Most of the people in the hall didn't realize Lena was Thomas's wife when they first saw her. Thomas, one of the main speakers at the forum, was internationally renowned for his work on artificial intelligence mathematics. However, most of his research had originated from Lena's calculations at the kitchen table late at night. Thomas knew this, but stood behind her out of respect for her preference to stay in the background. Lena, however, was there just to support him. She didn't aim to impress anyone, but the crowd mistook her silence for weakness. Thus, contempt started as a subtle undercurrent and then grew into outright mockery. As the room buzzed, Lena's space was nearly full. The boldest among them was Amelia Wagner, one of the young stars of the forum. She walked up to the board with a marker and stopped right in front of Lena. Her smile was condescending, her words challenging. "Let's see if you're a real academic. Solve this," she said, writing a complex combinatorics problem on the board, something her group had struggled with for months. "If you can't, you'll just get up and leave like a lady who knows her place." A brief silence fell. Most of the people in the room, holding their coffees, shifted their attention to Lena, eager to watch the moment unfold, a stranger being pushed back into nothingness. But Lena only shook her head. There was no panic, no anger in her eyes. She slowly opened her thick notebook but didn't even look at it. She stood up, walked toward the board. Her steps were calm, her body language straight. When she grabbed the marker, the buzzing in the room stopped. Lena began writing. After the first line, a sigh could be heard. When the second line appeared, some leaned in, trying to see more clearly. By the third line, two professors sitting next to each other began whispering. Without stopping or making corrections, Lena filled the board with formulas in 3 minutes. When she was done, she left the marker on the board and returned to her seat. The room was in a chilling silence. Amelia Wagner struggled to respond. "Is this it?" she asked dismissively. But her voice was no longer as confident. Her eyes were on the solution, not because she understood it, but because she realized she didn't. A senior professor in the room slowly stood up. He adjusted his glasses and walked toward the board. He studied it for a long time. Then, turning to the crowd, his voice trembled. "This solution is the very shortcut, and it's the most advanced modeling presented at this forum. This is an approach that hasn't even made it to the literature yet." Lena's face was still calm. She didn't say a word from her seat. But in that moment, the atmosphere in the hall had changed. The looks had shifted from contempt to admiration. Who was this woman? Where had she learned all this? And why hadn't anyone heard of her before? The first act hadn't even finished, but it was clear who she was on that stage. Lena was the quiet but most powerful voice in that hall. The hum in the hall faded for a moment in awe of the brilliance of the formulas on the board. Everyone had the same questions in their minds. Was this solution really possible? Who was Lena? And how had she gone unnoticed for so long? The equations, still visible under the lights, were like a seal etched into the center of the room, a truth carved through the arrogance that had filled the air. Amelia Wagner wanted to look at the board again, but was no longer sure of herself. There was anger in her eyes, but this time it wasn't contempt, it was an attempt to understand. The solution presented a different approach to the model her research group had struggled with for months. Lena's method had a clarity rarely seen, even in academic circles. It wasn't simplicity, it was a depth that led to simplicity. For a moment, Amelia doubted her own knowledge. And for someone like her, that was unbearable. At that moment, senior participants in the front rows began to rise from their seats. Quietly, but with visible urgency, they made their way to the board. Some were taking photos of the solution, others were jotting down notes. The attention had shifted. No longer was it on Amelia, but on Lena's notebook. That thick, worn notebook. The one that had been mocked and ridiculed since she first entered the room. Now, in everyone's eyes, it had transformed into an invaluable treasure. And in the midst of all this chaos, a new silence fell over the room. The man entering through the door was recognized before his name was even announced: Thomas. He wore a black suit, but it wasn't flashy. His expression was serious, and his gaze was steady. He had been the most awaited speaker at this forum for a long time. But he didn't head for the podium. His eyes locked directly on Lena. In that moment, the same sentence echoed in everyone's hearts. We didn't know she was his wife. When Thomas reached the microphone, the lights in the hall dimmed slightly. Everyone fell silent. All eyes were on him, but Thomas didn't take his eyes off Lena. He adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and then raised his voice in the calmest but clearest tone possible. I want to leave my time today not for myself, but for the person who truly deserves it. Those sitting in the front rows lifted their heads. Thomas continued, This forum invited me to celebrate my achievements. But I must be honest with you. Behind these achievements, there is a woman sitting right here. She's the one who has worked tirelessly day and night with me, debating with me, testing my solutions, sometimes even tearing them apart. The essence of many papers published under my name is found in her notebook. A murmur rose in the hall, but no one dared to speak. Thomas's voice filled the microphone again. Lena is not only my wife. She is the woman who turned down full scholarships for PhD offers from 3 different universities to care for her mother. In that notebook, there are formulas that will illuminate your years of work. And the solution, the one you all dismissed with contempt, is now part of the history of this forum. A woman's coffee cup dropped from her hand, crashing to the floor with a clink. No one turned to look. Everyone was watching Lena. She was still sitting in her place. Silent, upright, calm. She neither lifted her head with pride nor lowered it in shame. She simply kept holding her notebook just as she always had. The atmosphere in the hall had changed. The boundaries between people had shaken, titles had quietly withdrawn. Lena's presence was no longer just about a solution. She had become a mirror that questioned the system. While for many, being at this forum symbolized status, for Lena, it was simply about one thing: supporting others. But now, everyone wanted to know her name. At that moment, many of the academics hearing Lena's name for the first time felt an unease they couldn't quite define. The structure they were used to had been disrupted. Forums, seminars, podiums, all of these had been shaped by appearance, titles, and past achievements. But Lena had come from outside that system. She had no prestigious schools shining in her resume, nor had her name appeared in any respected journals. And now, in the middle of the room, not only with a solution, but with her very presence, she had caused the system to be questioned. This was why the strongest reaction came from the forum's organizing team. Marcus, one of the coordinators known for his obsession with protecting protocol and for his velvet waistcoat, walked slowly toward Lena. He was holding his tablet tightly, as if he were losing power. A fake smile spread across his face, but his tone was cold. "Ma'am," he said quietly but audibly, "this room is only open to accredited speakers and approved participants. Please use the atrium for the general session." His words now seemed meaningless in the eyes of everyone who had witnessed Lena's solution. But for people like Marcus, reality was bound by procedures. Lena didn't lower her head to respond. Instead, she slowly placed her notebook on her lap, clasped her hands, and waited. The room was divided once again. Some believed Marcus was right. Rules were rules. But others could no longer remain silent. "Could you write this solution yourself?" A voice came from the front rows. It was Dr. Albrecht, an elderly professor who had been on the scientific advisory board of the forum for years. His jacket was worn, his glasses scratched, but his gaze was sharp. He stood up and turned to Marcus. "Is it the outfit, The name on the badge or the notebook that's important? Or is it the solution on the board? A murmur began in the hall. Lena had still not spoken, but the number of people speaking on her behalf was growing. A young woman representing one of the forum's sponsors closed her notebook and stood up. I believe this solution will guide the projects we fund, and I want to thank this person. At this point, control had been lost. Those wanting to remove Lena from the hall were starting to be left alone. Amelia Wagner was still sitting silently in her corner. All the members of her research group, established under her own name, were busy downloading pictures of the solution Lena had written on the board to their phones. Amelia, for the first time in her life, was being tested not only by her knowledge but by her arrogance as well. On the other side of the hall, Thomas was still standing. With the patience and calm of a man proud of his wife, he watched what was happening. But it was clear from his eyes that he was trying not to let Lena break again. Perhaps that was why he walked to the microphone once more. "If my wife is here right now," he said, "it's only because she wanted to support me." He paused, his voice firm. "But you chose to belittle her. You interpreted her silence as weakness, her humility as ignorance, her simplicity as worthlessness." He looked across the room, then added, "And now, you must face the insecurities hidden beneath all those titles." After these words, silence fell. Not just the words, but the weight of a woman's presence filled the entire hall. As Lena's fingers lightly touched the cover of her notebook, another figure approaching from the back row caught attention. Dr. Evelyn Becker, the head of the forum. Known for her authority, this time her expression was mixed, a little admiration, a little regret. "I think," Dr. Becker said, "this year's forum has shown us that not only science, but also our perspectives need to change. And perhaps most of all, we need to learn to listen." For the first time, a shy but sincere round of applause rose from the audience. It grew louder, spreading. Lena gave a slight nod, as a gesture of thanks. But she still didn't speak. There was no need for her to. The entire room had already understood the weight of her notebook. At first, the applause was hesitant. It was as if everyone was looking at their own hands, wondering, does applauding this woman mean questioning everything we've believed in for years? But then one person joined in, then another. Finally, under the crystal chandeliers in the hall, the applause grew, not just for one woman, but as a salute to the truth. And at that moment, Lena's face changed for the first time. She thanked them with nothing more than her eyes, but it was clear. She didn't smile. She didn't revel in victory, because she had never been after victory. She had only come to support the man she loved. But what she had encountered was the toxic fabric of the system, and, by accident, she had brought the key to tear it apart. Meanwhile, outside the hall, other developments were unfolding. The representatives of the forum's main sponsor, the Research Foundation, had already sent the photo of the solution to their scientific boards. A few minutes later, phones began to buzz. The response was clear. "This is the shortest and most robust model in the literature." Then, find out who this person is. There were still a few people in the hall who didn't want to believe in Lena. At the forefront of this group was Amelia Wagner, who had almost taken pleasure in belittling Lena. Pretending to take notes on her phone, her mind was actually elsewhere. Her rise in the academic world had been built on crushing competition. But now, she was facing someone she couldn't crush. And that was unraveling all the equations in her career. Amelia turned to the board once more. With suspicious eyes, she scanned the formulas. She examined every line. But the more she studied, the clearer the correctness of the solution became. In that moment, something inside her broke. Her ambition was replaced with a fragile acceptance. To hide it, she stood up and walked toward the back door of the hall. But before she left, she paused. She turned to Lena. She didn't apologize, nor did she thank her. She just slightly nodded. And then, she left. That nod was a salute from someone like Amelia. It was the first time she was giving space to the voices she had silenced for years. Then, one of the most unexpected moments in the hall occurred. Dr. Evelyn Becker took the microphone. Known for her corporate tone, this woman was speaking for the first time outside of her usual identity. "Today," she said, "we've all seen something beyond titles, labels, and expensive fabrics. We've learned that true talent can sometimes be hidden in the most humble places." Her voice didn't falter, but her tone was softer. "And we've realized that this forum needs a real change." A round of applause rose from the back of the hall. This time, it was stronger. People weren't just celebrating Lena anymore, they were also celebrating the small victories they had won against their own prejudices. Some were wiping away tears, others had their heads bowed. Lena wasn't watching them. Her eyes were still on her notebook, because the world inside her was bigger than the chaos outside. Then, in that moment, Thomas took the microphone again. "This forum invited me," he said. "But now there is only one person who should speak on this stage." He turned to Lena. "Lena," he said, "these people want to hear something from you. Whatever you want, it will be." Lena stood up. Her steps were slow again, but this time, they were not measured, they were determined. When she reached the microphone, the hall fell silent again. She hadn't spoken up until now. But now, everyone was waiting for her words. Lena took the microphone, breathed in, and for the first time, her voice was heard. "I didn't come here to prove anything to anyone." There was dead silence in the hall. "I only wanted to support my husband. But you asked for a solution for me, and I gave it." She paused, because sometimes silence isn't about shrinking yourself. It's about waiting for the right time. Those words hit the hall like a punch, because with each sentence, many in the room were facing their own past. How many people had they judged just by appearances? How many people, like Lena, had been silenced yet, if given a microphone, could they have changed the direction of the room? The applause didn't come right away. No one could feel high enough to stand and applaud after Lena's words. In that silence, everyone was looking into Lena's eyes. And there, they weren't just reading the traces of one woman, but of a revolution. Lena's words hung in the air. It was as if the oxygen in the hall had changed. No applause erupted, no cheers followed. But at that moment, everyone who made eye contact with each other felt the same thing. The history of this forum had been split in two with that one sentence. There was now a clear before and after. And the person who drew that line had neither spoken from the podium nor been adorned with academic awards. She had simply spoken when it was needed, and that was stronger than anything else. However, the silence didn't last long. Members of the forum's board began gathering backstage for an emergency meeting. The sponsors had grabbed their phones, already discussing the patent rights of Lena's solution, the publication process, and partnership offers. That hall was no longer a temple of science, but a power center revolving around Lena. At that very moment, a notification appeared on the forum's digital screens. One of the interns had uploaded Lena's solution to the system. The software confirmed the solution's accuracy and automatically compared it to all known approaches in the literature. The result was clear. This solution is the shortest and most consistent method known. There was a small note below. Source, Lena M. Independent observer. As the elite groups in the hall exchanged looks, the first traces of concern appeared on many faces. Because Lena had not only done what was right, she had also struck at the pillars of the arrogant structure they had built. Those who boasted of their resumes, those preparing elaborate presentations, and those who flaunted obscure terminology to assert superiority. All of them fell silent in the face of the quiet sentence Lena had written with nothing but a pen and a notebook. Dr. Evelyn Becker stepped up to the podium once again. But this time, she was no longer wearing her heavy jacket. She had undone the buttons of her suit and tied her hair back. When she began speaking, her voice was not tense but sincere and weary. "Today, we learned not just a solution, but a stance. And I want to be clear about this. Until now, we've separated justice from success. But we can no longer do that." Then, she turned and looked at Lena. "I want to give this year's Forum Honor Award, unanimously, to Lena. This is recognition not just for a solution, but for character." The entire hall rose to its feet. This time, the applause was not controlled, but heartfelt. Lena's face took on an emotional expression. She was shocked, as all this attention was against her nature. But she calmly stood, walked forward. Her notebook was in her hand. When she accepted the microphone, she said just one thing. "This award is not for me. It's for all the silenced minds." A lump formed in everyone's throat. It was no longer about Lena's brilliance, it was about what she represented. She had become a symbol for everyone who had been left out of the system, those who hadn't been listened to, those who had been kept in the background. But the story didn't end there. The next day, a statement on the forum's official website announced some changes. The research funds led by Amelia Wagner were suspended. The reason? Academic ethics violations and behavior harmful to the community. On the same day, Marcus, The protocol officer who had requested Lena's expulsion was dismissed from his position. The reign of these figures who had controlled the forum for years had come to an end. Lena also received PhD offers from 3 different universities with special status. However, she didn't respond to any of them immediately. She still hadn't parted with her notebook. Because for Lena, what mattered wasn't names, titles, or stages. What mattered was the ability to write the truth even in silence. Lastly, Thomas. After the forum, he went backstage to Lena. In a secluded area, away from the crowd, he took her hand. He looked into her eyes and simply said, "Every success that has my name on it was written with your voice. Now everyone knows, and I am proud of your silence." Lena smiled softly for the first time, because maybe, amidst all of this, the most valuable thing was this. Her intention had been understood, and sometimes that is worth more than being accepted by a university 1,000 times. Days passed. The forum hall emptied, the screens went dark, and the echoes beneath the chandeliers faded. But Lena's solution was not erased from the board. It couldn't be erased, because that solution was no longer just a mathematical model. It was the silent but unforgettable signature of a mind, a heart, and a stance. The press, social media, academic blogs, everyone started talking about her. But the strange thing was, Lena never gave an interview. She never spoke on any platform. She politely turned down the offers from universities. She left only one email. "For me, gratitude is bringing someone else out of silence. If this solution opens the way for another mind, my task is complete." And then, she disappeared. She had no social media profile, no academic resume. But after that day, similar stories started to be heard from different parts of the world. At a conference, a janitor wrote a formula on the board, and applause filled the hall. Somewhere else, a woman who had kept letters for years sent an article to a scientific journal and made waves. Lena's name was not mentioned in any of these stories, but her spirit was in every line. It was as if an invisible force had set out to make people believe in their own potential. Meanwhile, Thomas quietly continued his journey. He attended fewer conferences and spent more time mentoring his students. In his classes, there was only one added message in the notes. If you ignore someone's silence, perhaps you're missing the future. Lena and Thomas began to live in a quiet village, far from the hustle and bustle of the cities. In their garden, there was a small table. On it, Lena's notebook, Thomas's notes, and 2 coffee cups side by side. Lena was still writing. But now, it was for no one but herself. Because sometimes, the greatest revolutions are not meant to be told to others, but to be lived. In the old forum hall, that too changed. After Lena, a tradition began. The final session of the conference held every year was titled Anonymous Participants. Anyone who wished to speak at the podium could do so without any questions about their past or titles. A large sign was placed at the entrance of the hall. It had just one sentence written on it. "True intelligence rises from within silence." Years later, a young student stood in front of that sign. He turned to a simple-looking woman who had come with her mother and asked, "Mom, who said this?" The woman smiled. The person who said this, though she never spoke, was heard. You don't need to know her name. Her mark is still here. Lena's story may not have been written, but every mind added a new line to it. And sometimes, the deepest stories begin in a notebook but are completed in a world. If this story has moved you, if you felt that sometimes silence speaks the loudest, and if you believe that true value lies not in appearances, but in the heart and mind, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video, because every story can be a step to amplify another voice. And maybe one day, your story will light the way for someone else.